Welcome to Civilization Jihad Awareness, the show where truth wins every time. Today, we have one of my favorite writers on the topic of Islam and politics, Oren Litwin, joining us. First, let me tell you what Civilization Jihad means. It is the topic that was created, and this whole term was created by the Muslim Brotherhood here in North America. It is a term that was explained to us through the discovery of a document called the Explanatory Memorandum, which was discovered back in 2004. This document has one paragraph in it that is all important. It says, the process of a settlement is a civilization jihadist process with all the word means. The Ikhwan must understand, Ikhwan means brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands in the hands of the believers. They're talking about the Muslims. So that it is eliminated and God's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Without this level of understanding, we are not up to this challenge and have not prepared ourselves for jihad yet. It is a Muslim's destiny to perform jihad and work wherever he is and wherever he lands until the final comes. And there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack, but with the slackers and the mujahideen be equal. This is a very, very important passage. And I say that, and what you're going to hear today from Oren Litwin. He is a genius in his writing. I think this man is in some ways, hopefully, writing prophetically, because the article we're going to cover today is really big. So who is Oren? Oren Litwin he does research for the Middle East Forum's Islamist Money in Politics project. He is an associate fellow for R Street Institute. He previously worked in financial advising and investment management for more than a decade. Most recently as part of the AIG Advisor Group. He then served as political risk fellow for the Young Professionals in Foreign Policy and as an adjunct professor for political science at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. Mr. Litwin has a Ph.D. in political science from George Mason University. His work has been published by the Foreign Policy Association, the Huffington Post, The Hill, and RealClearMarkets.com. And let me just bring him in. Hello, Mr. Litwin. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Paul. Thank you for having me. That was quite a warm introduction.
I have been reading your work for quite a long time, and I have to say that your topic on this article is just, which I did put in the description of the show, guys. So if you want to go there, I will put the link in again to the thing because I'm noticing the link on the page does not work. But let me tell you, this is a very, very powerful article. Why am I saying that? Because the topic, terrorism financing, it's time to take care of unfinished business. Mr. Litwin, if this is, I mentioned SAR Network in my book. I'm hoping to God you are right. So let's get down to brass tacks. I am hoping that you've nailed it. Mr. Litwin, I love your articles. Terrorism financing, it's time to take care of unfinished business is one of the most important articles I've seen this year. Your article starts out talking about the SAR network. That's SAAR, guys. Please tell our listeners what the SAR network is.
Absolutely. So the SAR network is actually a series of almost 100, or actually more than 100, different organizations, whether they're nonprofits, charities, commercial firms, think tanks, that are all organized by the same nucleus of people and all organized around what was called the SAR Foundation, which was founded in 1983. And this foundation and all the other entities that were associated with it and who were led by the same people, it was designed solely as a way for unknown Saudi benefactors to launder millions and millions of dollars into the United States banking system to do a couple of things. We know that they were supporting some terrorist groups with some of that money. And we know that that other parts of the money, actually several millions of dollars, was used to finance the operations of the International Institute for Islamic Thought, the IIIT, which is essentially the Muslim Brotherhood's think tank in the United States.
Now, Jamal Berzinji and Yaakov Mirza are credited on IIIT's page quite often with having started the SAR network and SAR Foundation.
Yes, absolutely. Berzinji, I mean, both of them are very interesting men from a sort of clinical perspective. Berzinji in particular, he was active in founding pretty much every single major Islamist institution in the United States that was controlled by the Muslim Brotherhood in some level. That includes the Muslim Students Association back in the 60s. That includes the North American Islamic Trust, which finances a large number of the mosques in the United States in exchange for exerting some element of control. He was a founding member of the World Association for Muslim Youth, which is an international organization, the United States branch of which was actually shut down for its connections with Al-Qaeda. Berzinji passed away, I believe, in 2015, and he was lauded by the IIIT and by other Islamist organizations, as well he should have been, because he was the major actor in really setting these up. He was tremendously energetic. Yaakov Mirza is still around, still active. He is primarily known for his work in Islamic finance, which is a branch of finance trying to set up investments so that observant Muslims who do not believe in charging usury and other sorts of forbidden investments will be able to invest their money. Now, Islamic finance by itself is not necessarily problematic. You know, it's just like socially responsible investing for Catholics or people who don't like nuclear weapons or anything like that. The possibility exists, however, that some of these firms could be used to gain control of investor money and then use it for nefarious purposes. Now, I don't know whether that's actually happening, but Mirza himself was directly involved in the SAR network and its money laundering activities, so who knows?
After the Holy Land Foundation's trial successful prosecution, were you wondering, like me, when are they going to go after SAR? Why do you think the Justice Department didn't go after the SAR network then?
So it's amazing, and it's really a question that you have to ask for three separate administrations: the Clinton administration, the Bush administration, the Obama administration, because the SAR network really came onto the federal radar already back in 1995 when Sami al-Arian, who is the North American leader of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, was raided, and they found records indicating that his organization had gotten support from the SAR network. So that was in 1995. Already in 1998, officials on the National Security Council were pushing for them to be investigated and shut down, but the FBI refused because they didn't want to be seen as profiling, which is incredible when you think about it. In 1999, the IRS actually audited the SAR Foundation because their tax statements were criminally incomplete. And even though they uncovered many, many violations of nonprofit regulations, they still confirmed the SAR Foundation's nonprofit status. And then finally, in 2002, the raid went forward where dozens of different SAR network locations were raided, but it only took place in March of 2002 because John Loftus, who's a counterterrorism researcher, threatened to actually file suit against the government for not raiding these people and not prosecuting them. And he said that he had heard from his sources that originally the feds had planned to raid the SAR network in January, but the raid had been canceled due to political pressure from figures in the administration because the SAR network was so closely connected with major figures in the Saudi banking world, and they didn't want to cause a diplomatic incident with the Saudis, which is incredible. And so they were allowed to the raid went forward in 2002, but there was no prosecution. Federal agents were complaining anonymously, even in 2005, that they were not being given the resources they needed to complete the investigation. They didn't get translators, they didn't get computer forensics experts. And so of the cartloads and cartloads of material that had been carried off in the raids, almost none of it had been analyzed. And so this investigation was allowed to linger and linger while the SAR network itself pretty much operated as it had been. And then finally, a journalist named Patrick Poole, who works for PJ Media, who's a fantastic journalist, he reported in 2011 that his sources in Congress told him that the investigation into the SAR network was shut down entirely by Assistant Attorney General David Criss. And the reason was that the reason given was that he didn't want to inflame the Muslim community or to embarrass the administration, because at that point, the progressive movement has been getting friendlier and friendlier to Muslims, and particularly Islamists who are actively trying to cultivate that because they want to be seen as tolerant and so on. But in the meanwhile, prosecutors were incredibly upset because they were preparing to indict the major players in the SAR Foundation on money laundering and tax fraud, and they have solid cases for both. And you can actually read even the evidence that the feds had back in 2002 before the raid, which was the basis for getting the search warrants in the first place. If you look at the federal affidavit of Customs Agent David Kane, who is leading the investigation, that's Kane, and he lays out page after page after page of the evidence which had been found during the raid of Sami al-Aryan and during the investigation of the tax documents of different entities within the SAR network. And it's incredible stuff. Wow.
I had not heard that latest article you were talking about by Poole, or about the AG that was willing to drop everything. I hadn't even found a name for that. I'm impressed. Wow. Wow. I'm kind of really surprised. I did not expect to hear that. I read David Kane's affidavit, and I read the other piece where he's talking about where the SAR network funding went when it disappeared. Mm-hmm. And that was the Isle of Man, if I remember correct. And
yeah, there were at least, I believe, 2 or 3 different trusts which were set up in various tax havens, including the Isle of Man. The one that we know about for sure was called, I believe, the Humana Charitable Trust, and the trustee was Yaqub Mirza. So there's actually a very funny incident that Kane writes about in his affidavit. In 1997, Yaqub Mirza, in his capacity as trustee for the Humana Trust, wrote a fundraising letter to Yaqub Mirza, the principal of the SAR Foundation, asking for a donation from the SAR Foundation to Humana Trust. So it's the most incredible thing.
He wrote a letter to himself.
Exactly.
That's crazy. And was there a legal reason behind him doing that? That they had to have a petition?
Yes. Well, as far as writing the letter, I don't actually know. I do know that the reason that they set up the trust in the Isle of Man, in the late 1990s, I believe there were news reports that were coming out accusing the SAR network, SAR Foundation, and various other entities linked to it of being connected with terrorism, probably because of the Sami al-Aryan investigation. And so the decision was made to form these tax havens in order to get assets out of the country. And so I believe that was done in 2000. The actual SAR Foundation itself dissolved in 2000 because it was getting too much scrutiny. But all the assets were simply transferred both to this Humana Trust, to other trusts outside the United States, and to the Sterling Charitable Fund, I believe, which was one of the so-called charities within the SAR network. And it was so it received the stock held in the Marjack Poultry Farm, I believe, which was one of the legitimate businesses owned by the network.
This is what got me when I started connecting all the dots. You mentioned Jamal Brzezinski, and Jamal Brzezinski is one of those persons who, when I first started doing my research, I figured that he had to be one of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood. Then I read David Galbutz's book, The Muslim Mafia, and discovered that he says according to David Galbutz, he was the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood, and that was because of all his connections that I kept finding. He was connected to SAR, he was connected to this, the Safa network, everything else. He seemed like all these connections was just crazy, just amazing. given some of the names you mentioned, like Barzinji and Mirza, do you think the employment of children and grandchildren of the leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood in the White House had something to do with not pursuing the case? And you kind of answered that. This was my next question. This was during Obama's time.
Right. And so we're referring to two people in particular, I believe. We're referring to Zaki Barzinji, who's the grandson of Jamal Barzinji, and he had been hired in 2016 by the White House in the Office of Public Engagement as a liaison to the Muslim American community. And that was after working for Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, where I am, for quite a number of years as one of his key staffers. And then the other one is Asma Mirza, who is, it's unclear exactly what relationship she has with Yaqub Mirza, but she is, I'm sorry?
That's her father. Yaqub Mirza is her father.
Okay.
And
so
Yaqub Mirza, that I know, and she worked in the, oh gosh, I gotta say it now. She was in charge of budget, Office of Budget.
Yeah, Office of Management and Budget.
Yes.
And she was hired, I believe, in 2010. Right now, so at the change of administrations, both of them left the White House. Zaki is currently, I believe, a senior policy advisor for MPAC. Asma Mirza is currently at McKinsey. So the question is, was their hiring related to the closure of the investigation? I think I couldn't say it's directly relevant. What I would say is that the fact that they were hired, even while these investigations were going on, or at least in the case of Asma Mirza, indicates the degree to which the Obama administration, at least, was friendly to elements of the Muslim Brotherhood, I would say. Maybe not as a matter of policy, but certainly in effect. And actually, I take that back, because we do know as a matter of policy that the Obama administration was hoping to engage the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt and elsewhere as a way of co-opting Islamic radicalism and trying to make it friendlier to the United States, I suppose, which can't imagine that went very well. But as part of this agenda, they were trying to build connections to the American Islamist community in many senses.
Wow. So why is now the right time to go after the SAR network? So,
the right time. It's unclear whether there ever was a wrong time, really, but this is certainly a better opportunity, just because the Trump administration, we've seen a greater willingness for them to actively challenge the Muslim Brotherhood. They've been publicly talking about designating them as a terrorist organization. They have rescinded certain grants that were being administered by the Countering Violent Extremism program that the Obama administration had launched. Then those grants had been going to organizations that were linked to the Brotherhood in one way or the other, such as MPAC, the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, or Council rather. So they were willing to rescind these grants, and they're willing to really address the Muslim Brotherhood as an adversary. So that's one thing. Another thing is that the Trump administration has many fewer connections to the usual sort of Beltway influence peddlers, many of whom were influenced by the Islamists, like Barzinji and Mirza and their colleagues, Hisham al-Talib and Omar Ashraf, were all heavy donors to politicians in the terms of tens of thousands of dollars each. So very likely those political connections were one of the things that gave them protection. So now that you have a new administration that seems less connected to all that, you have more freedom of action there. And the other thing, I hope some of your readers or listeners have already heard about this, but within the last week, Saudi Arabia has started an amazing purge of certain branches of its royal family. People have been, princes have been arrested, confined, major investors and business people have been arrested. And among those were people who we know to be Islamists, such as Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who was a major supporter of Islamic studies programs in the United States, for example, at Georgetown. So it's possible, given that the power of Saudi Islamists to provide cover to the Brotherhood in the United States is very much diminished. And that gives us yet another reason to go after the SAR network now.
Now that brings up another question which I didn't even think of since you're saying that, bringing this up. Do you this just makes me think all again. Is it possible that Trump's connections and how he's connecting with people and working with people overseas, and even counting Saudi Arabia, is that connection possibly influencing the news? I was really shocked to read those articles this week about the Saudis pursuing. I was shocked. I don't know how else to explain it, because that was one of those things I'd never expected to happen.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So for a little context, the Saudi kingdom had actually become hostile to the Muslim Brotherhood for the first time starting around 2010, because for decades previous, Saudi Arabia had actually been quite an enthusiastic patron of the Brotherhood. But then around 2010, 2011, 2012, they realized that the Brotherhood was a threat to themselves as well. So the Saudis turned against the Saudi government, I should say, turned against the Brotherhood. They actually, you may have heard back in 2013 or 2014, one or the other, they actually declared the Brotherhood to be a terrorist organization. Yes. And more recently, they've been leading a coalition of Gulf states against the country of Qatar, specifically because of its support for the Brotherhood and for other extremist groups. And so the Saudis, it seems, have had a major sea change in the way they view the Brotherhood and the way they want to interact with the Brotherhood. Complicating that, however, was the fact that the Obama administration very much opposed these moves. They saw them as inflammatory, as destabilizing. They wanted the Brotherhood to be a major counterpart to its diplomatic efforts, and they saw the Saudi effort as potentially radicalizing them. So now that the Obama administration has given way to the Trump administration, it's quite possible that Trump gave them, the green light from the American perspective to push harder. I mean, we'll have to see how it all turns out, but it does seem possible.
It's going to be a while before I get that article. Still, those two articles that really came out because it wasn't just one article. There was one article that came out and talked about getting rid of corruption, and this second article named the prince that was arrested, and it wasn't just the prince. They named big people with big money in Saudi Arabia, and they were trying. If they do close off all of this, Saudi Arabia will be doing business differently as a whole, because they talked about how they even came out and talked about the bribing that was regularly done, which that kind of blew my mind too. I did not expect that to make an article on Saudi Arabia, because everybody's protecting them. Yeah, that was a surprise.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see where the current Saudi regime goes with this. Are they actually cleaning out deadwood, or are they trying to restructure the balance of power internally so that they get more control over society? I mean, it could be both. In authoritarian regimes, somebody's always got their eye on the bottom line, no matter what else is going on. So this purge could serve multiple purposes, which is probably going to be fine with us.
Definitely. I'm looking forward to seeing this kind of thing. I don't know. I really did not expect that part to come in. So going back to SAR, is there any new information that we have on SAR that we didn't have before?
Earth-shaking, I would say not yet, because we don't know what the investigators came up with during, after the raids and what they discovered. And that's one of the major reasons that I had for writing the article in National Review in the first place, was to sort of prod the law enforcement institutions to reassess that evidence and really dig into it and find out what's there and get it out to the American people, because I think there's probably a lot of important stuff in there. That said, however, I've kept an eye on the IIIT, just looking at their public statements, like their IRS Form 990, and the amazing thing is that the most recent one that's publicly available is from the year 2015, and they're doing the same kinds of things that they were doing that provoked the initial raid in 2002. They're not naming the recipients of their overseas grants, as they're legally required to do. They have no public fundraising. The money they get, it's something like $7 million during the 2015 year. The funding they get is all from other unnamed organizations, and presumably the ones that are part of the SAR network, which is how it used to be funded. And they've actually been dramatically increasing their funding of American universities. So I believe there was something like $500,000 in funding to Georgetown for certain activities there that the Islamists control. They've made some very high-profile gifts to places like, unfortunately, my alma mater, George Mason. They gave, I think, $1 million to endow a professor in Islamic studies. And I should say Islamic studies is not inherently a bad thing, but the question is, who is going to be the professor? What are his leanings? What kind of radicalism could he be promulgating in the classroom? And is any of that because the IIIT is exerting some sort of control over who gets hired? And we just don't know. So basically, the IIIT seems to be acting with impunity because either they think they're not going to be penalized for flagrantly violating nonprofit regulations, or they think it's actually more dangerous to actually disclose who they're granting money to overseas. And either of those possibilities does not sit well with me.
And Triple IT is one of the reasons I got into this game. They gifted Nazareth College $500,000, and somebody said, "Hey, didn't you go there? This is Nazareth College of Rochester, right here in Rochester, New York." They gifted them $500,000, got an Islamist chair, and that is the whole reason I'm in this game, because it became local to me. And they told me to shut up, and I was already a published research writer. Don't ask questions. I got blacklisted for asking the questions, and now I'm in the game.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that American universities have been so eager to accept funding that they're not asking questions about where the funding came from. I mean, we saw that with the Triple IT. We saw that with Prince Al-Walid himself, the gentleman who was just arrested, and the tremendous amounts of money he was using to fund academic work that was favorable toward Islamism in the United States. And it's unfortunate that the universities have allowed themselves to be co-opted by the Islamist movement in general.
Hey, do you happen to know if I wrote an article on Yale a little while back. Now I'm curious. I had not even thought of this since you brought up the Saudis. Do you happen to remember if I look for the name now? I'm gonna look for the Yale my Yale articles, because I wrote a piece on Yale taking funding from Saudis, and I just got to find the articles. But what kills me was, no matter what happened when I wrote these articles, they weren't listening. I mean, they didn't really care. It's going to drive me nuts till I find it. I worked hard on these articles, learning who Camel. That was this. Abdallah Camel. That's who I'm looking at. Do you know if they? Because they created the Abdallah Camel Center for the Study of Islamic Law and Civilization at Yale. And Abdallah Salah Camel. Do you happen to know if that name was on that list by chance?
Let's see. I see.
I didn't even see.
Well, I see you mentioned it in your article.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sorry. Which list?
Well, they didn't really. Did they? I saw a small list, and then I didn't see very many names on who they were saying they indicted. As far as indict might be the wrong word, considering it's Saudi Arabia, but I hadn't seen it. Now I'm curious.
So
now, if that happens, if some of these Saudis get arrested this is what I'm thinking. If they get arrested in Saudi Arabia and jailed, and their names are on public universities here, that could be pretty interesting.
Yes. So far, we've not had too many names released. Only 2 or 3 of the more prominent princes, including Al-Walid bin Talal. And so, obviously, we're waiting to get more information about that.
Okay, wait. His name is one of these. I'm going to put this link in the chat room. I just quick look. Daily Mail CO, thedailymail.com has an article, and I'm just going to put the link in the chat room. I don't know if you can see that. I'm hoping you can. All right, let's see. This is the article. And Saudi Prince's 5-star prison, humiliation of Saudi royals as they are photographed sleeping on bare mattresses in luxury hotel after corruption arrests, as Trump says they have been milking their country for years. Oh, wow.
Okay.
Let's see. I just going to do.
Okay.
Salah. Do that Control F thing. Control Z into my search engine. It's not going to happen. And it's an interesting article. They sleep on the floor in their luxury 5-star prison. 11 Saudi princes, government ministers, businessmen await their fate in a luxury prison.
Interesting.
Photograph. That's just mind blowing. So you arrest the prince and you put him in a luxury hotel, 5-star prison. They have 11 Saudi princes and others in there. And if you go down this article, you find pictures of them sleeping on the floor. Well, they're not on the floor. They're on very thin mattresses.
Yeah.
Still, it's just a mind blower.
Yeah. So Abdullah Saleh Kamal, he was arrested. This is interesting.
Yeah.
So I wonder if the Saudis are finally cleaning up those elements within the government and within the regime that were supportive of the Brotherhood.
So now I get to call Yale University and say, "Don't you think I was right?" The president of Yale refused to debate me on his stand there. So I was like, he wrote me a 1-sentence reply: "I will not accept your debate." Challenge.
That's a pity. Now, it's interesting. I'm thinking now about the response of the American academic community to events in Egypt, because there were quite a few academics who were friendly to the Brotherhood, who basically supported President Mohammed Morsi and were opposed to the coup that took him out of power, and that remained the case even afterward, because their argument was, yes, the Brotherhood was bad, but at least it was slightly democratic, and what followed was a military dictatorship, and they came up with all these different justifications for saying that Morsi's government was good. This is somewhat of a different situation, but I wonder if that same group of people whose larger thesis is the Muslim Brotherhood is actually a force for reform in the Middle East, amazingly, if that same group of people would then still think badly about this purge.
Not being said here, I'm going to say this. They did. Well, they're talking about these people, individuals, and it is a purge. That is the right way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a purge of corruption, if you ask me. If Abdullah Saleh Kamal has a son with the same name, and they don't use the term, they don't use junior over there. So this is the interesting part of it. Abdullah S. Kamal or Abdullah Saleh Kamal, they both use the same name. So it would be interesting. It looks like the elder is arrested, from what I'm reading, but it could be also the younger. And if it's one and not the other, that's what gets interesting, because the Yale University has named it after the younger, while receiving funds from pretty much both. So yes, we'll have some fun with that one. Another reason to write another article.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd be curious to know how that goes.
This stuff is just you can't make this stuff up, people. That's the funny part about it. I'm amazed when I find this stuff. It's just I wouldn't have even thought to look. I don't know what's going to happen with SAR. I'm hoping that they can find out more today with the new tools that they have as far as searching tools and stuff to find out where things have gone. Because when I read David Kane's piece and he talked about all the finances disappearing into the Isle of Man, I was wondering, is that how we do things anymore? I mean, because I always thought they had more. I would think they would have had more, but they didn't reveal more, at least.
Well, I know the IRS has been putting a lot of pressure on foreign banks to disclose more about their American clients, so it's possible. And but the amazing thing is we don't even need that much more information to be able to prosecute the SAR network, because we already have so much just in the United States. Even if we can't track down every last dollar, what we do have is enough. I mean, we have at least $400,000 that Kane himself documents that were sent to the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. And aside from that, there were all the money laundering and the tax fraud issues. So if the government wanted to, they could arrest these people, they could charge them, and that itself would be doing a tremendous amount of good, because the IIIT itself is tremendously damaging, because it's advancing nonviolent Islamism in order to create this environment where Islamism is seen as good. It is seen as representative of all of Islam and all of Muslims, which it is not actually, but they are trying to become so, simply by virtue of repeating it enough times and then forcing the Muslim community in the United States to sort of toe this party line that being, a private Muslim and a public citizen is not enough. You have to actually come into alignment with the larger program of subverting American democracy.
That's exactly it. And if they go after the SAR network, there's an like you're saying, there's an undeniable link between IIIT, as they like to call themselves, and the SAR network. Again, if you read their sites and when they talk about certain individuals, they brag. Jamal Dberzinji founded the SAR network and the Safa Trust. I mean, they'll say that with Yaakov Mirza and a few others, that they brag that these people took part. And who are these people involved with? They're involved with IIIT. They're involved with ISNA. That's Yaakov Mirza's big thing. So, yes, it could be the way to take down the Brotherhood here. That could be it.
And it's interesting because they were able to achieve this in the grand scheme of things. $50 million over 10 or 15 years is not a lot of money. And yet they were able to gain a tremendous amount of influence by donating to the right politicians, throwing the right parties, paying off the right colleges, and creating this environment, this haze of obfuscation to say that Islamism is the same as Islam, to say that Islamism is fundamentally a reforming impulse, and that the United States should be working with the Muslim Brotherhood instead of against it. And they were so tremendously successful. It's amazing.
I find it humorous because, when I went to look at IIIT's site this week, before there was something in there, because your article was on the SAR. I wanted to go see what is IIIT saying this week. And on their site, they now have this claim that they are about reform. Now, a couple years ago, they never talked about reform, at least not in my reading of anything that I saw from them. So I find that rather amusing that they're now claiming to be the reformists when they will have nothing to do with those people claiming to reform Islam. And that's very cool.
Like we at the Middle East Forum work a lot with a gentleman named Zuhdi Jasser, who leads the Muslim Reform movement, who is a true reformer, a true moderate, and the Brotherhood types can't stand him, and they try to freeze him out of every forum that he ever engages with. So for the IIIT to now say that they are reformers, on the one hand, it's quite funny, and on the other hand, it's interesting. It says something about, I think it could reflect the changing environment globally for the Muslim Brotherhood, where not only is the Trump administration less friendly to the Brotherhood, but also even the Gulf states have largely turned against them, with the exception of Qatar. And that's why the Saudis are trying to freeze Qatar out.
Now, is that correct? I've always wondered, I hear it said Qatar, or Qatar is the correct pronunciation?
So, I mean, it depends. It's a dialect thing. Okay. It's sort of Qatar, it's I can barely manage French vowels, So,
I was just curious. I hadn't heard it said that way. I want to thank you for joining us. This has been really highly informative. There's a lot of information I myself did not know, and I want to thank you for your continued work with the Middle East Forum, and want to encourage you to continue to write these wonderful articles that you keep putting out. Can you share with everybody how to follow your work? And
absolutely. So the Middle East Forum is our umbrella organization. You can find it at meforum.org. And I in particular work for one of our projects called the Islamist Watch, which is Islamist, ISLAMIST hyphen watch, WATCH.org. And you can find my articles there.
Follow, if you can, guys, connect to that. Subscribe to the Islamist Watch newsletter. I do. I'm going to encourage everybody to do that. If you've got extra cash to throw their way, please do. These organizations do great work.